James puts on a good show. I can vouch for him. Well, thank you everybody for being at Perk Up Thursday Coffee. I take a great deal of pleasure in introducing our speaker for today. I've known him for a long time. Great guy, just a great guy. In all honesty, I'm subbing today. Our speakers that were supposed to be here today had to suddenly cancel on Tuesday, so it is a little difficult to line up a new speaker in 2 days. So you get me. But it occurred to me as I was thinking about this that I really have not told my story to the group before, and I've got some entrepreneurial stories. I'm going to give you a little bit of my background, and then I'm going to pass along 3 business tips that I think are vital. And the ones I'm talking about today are, I see repeatedly mistakes being made by startups on these 3 topics. So without further ado, I'm going to dive right into it. Again, most of you know me. I'm Steve Boers. Grew up right down the road in Crete. Had a great childhood there. Went to college in New York. And after college, I sailed the high seas as a merchant seaman. So these are civilian ships. We carry cargo all over the world. These aren't military ships. I worked as a navigator and did that for 3 or 4 years and got to see a good chunk of the world before it got to be such a dangerous place. And so I really count that as a blessing in my life that I got to see so much of the world at a young age before I got too old, tired, and or scared to do it. So I didn't know some of the danger I put myself in at the time. I look back on it and think, yeah, I'm probably lucky to be alive, but that's okay. And if you ever want to hear sea stories, come to my office with a cup of coffee and I'll tell you some sea stories. And they're all gospel truth, I swear. The only thing that stopped me, the seagoing life was a fun one. It was exciting. You would work, for every 30 days I worked on a ship, I got 28 days paid vacation. So it was really a good gig. It was a high paid gig at the time. This was in the early 80s. And the only thing that got me to stop was that I met the love of my life when I was on one of my vacations. Met her here in Lincoln. She's a kindergarten teacher and has been her entire career. Been married 35 years now, and that's the best thing that ever happened to me. But I realized that going to sea and being gone 6 months a year wasn't such a good deal if you were married. So I went back to school, to the university, and got a master's degree in business, and that led me into banking. I worked for various banks in downtown Lincoln. And while working at one of these banks, I started my first side gig business. It was called Prairie Marketing Services. Ran it out of the basement of my home in Crete at the time. And we provided mystery shopping services. So does everybody know what mystery shopping is? Okay. We lined that up. We would recruit the mystery shoppers. We would train them. We would pay them. And then we would produce reports for our clients at the end of the month. So did that for a few years. And to show you what a brilliant, shrewd businessman I am, I ended up getting to a point where it was so time consuming and I was still working full time. I came to a crossroads and I had to make a decision. Am I going to keep this business and quit my day job, or am I going to keep my day job and get rid of the business? I ended up getting out of the business, and I basically transferred all of my systems and the software that I had developed for this to a woman in Omaha, who then built it up to a much higher degree than I ever did. She turned it into a company called Customer Service Profiles, and then when she sold out, I'm very sure that she became a millionaire about 10 years later. So good move on my part. So mistake number 1 right there. Later on, I worked for another bank in Lincoln that got acquired by a North Dakota bank. The marketing department I worked in, we all got laid off on the same day, and 3 of us took our severance checks and started a company called Cross Financial Group. Cross Financial Group is a bank consulting company. It still exists. They're located at 70th and O in the Meridian Park building. And they do marketing consulting work with banks, and they do mystery shopping programs for banks. And I was with Cross for 14 years before I decided to do other things. but they're still around. So that business is still going after 20 years. And to tell you a little story about that, I think I've told it before, but when we started the company, we put together a business plan, and we were pretty confident and cocky at the time that we did a good job on our plan and were realistic. And we showed it to a guy in town who's probably one of the most brilliant business people I've ever met, Mike Dunlap. Mike Dunlap is the CEO of Nelnet. His sister is the CEO of Union Bank. So they have a lot of business experience. And we showed our business plan to Mike Dunlap, and we projected a first-year loss. We weren't dumb. We knew it was going to be tough to make money in year one, but we projected a first-year loss, and Mike looked at the numbers, and he said, guys, this is a great business plan. He said, only one piece of advice. And we said, what's that? He pointed to the bottom line at our loss, and he said, double that number. And we said, no way, no way. But at the end of the year, he was right. We lost twice as much money in year one as we thought we would. And we were this close to being out of business. We didn't know if we were going to make payroll. It was really looking grim. We made some changes. We moved out of sexy office space downtown into somebody's living room. And we regrouped, and in year two we made money, and every year after that we made money. So we did recover from that bloody first year, but it was tough. From there, went to after I left Cross, went to another bank in town where I met Doris, and we worked together for a number of years at Tier 1 Bank. Tier 1 Bank then was taken over by Great Western Bank, and I worked there a couple years, got laid off in my mid-50s, which is not a fun thing. And then I count myself very lucky to have landed here, because this has been the most gratifying job I've ever worked by far. So, and thanks to a lot of you. With that, that's my background, and now I'm going to get into 3 pieces of business advice for startups that I think is crucial. Number 1, get it in writing from day one. Okay, I've seen this repeat itself over and over, and it creates issues. When we started Cross Financial Group, there were 3 of us that were shareholders. We all owned part of the company. And we had the wisdom to consult with an attorney when we started, and we got it all in writing so that when somebody exited the company, which at the time you don't ever think anybody's going to exit, okay? If you start with a partnership or you start a company with 2 or 3 other people, you never think anybody's going to leave. This is going to be forever, it's going to be great. We had it in writing what would happen if somebody exited. So after 14 years with the company, when I decided I wanted to do something else, there was no arguing, there was no fighting amongst the partners. We simply consulted the original founding documents. It outlined exactly how my shares would be valued and when I would be paid. I think the company had 90 days to pay me after I left. But it was all in writing. There was no arguing. And so to this day, I've still got a good relationship with the people I used to work with and that I started the company with, because it was all in writing. I think that's a critical thing. So always anticipate that somebody is going to leave and have it in writing from day one. And when you start that business, you really need to think about how you're going to end the business too. I tell people that. So hopefully when you spend a career building a business, you've got something maybe that you can sell at the end of that, and keep that in mind. It's okay to create your own job and really not build a business, just create your own job, but then you have nothing to sell when you retire. So try to build something that's bigger than you, that maybe has employees, and spend a lot of time thinking about your transition plan. Who can I sell this to when I get out? How can I sell this when I get out? Huge problem in Nebraska right now is baby boomers my age who are coming to retirement age, and they want to get out of their business. They want to sell it, but then they're having a hard time finding buyers. And it's largely because they didn't spend a lot of time thinking about it in advance. So, number 1, get it in writing. Number 2, my mentor always had a saying that I heard probably a million times when I worked with him. And he always said, if it looks good, it sells good. And he hammered that into my head. If it looks good, it sells good. And his point being, make sure that all your materials, marketing materials, letterhead, business cards, make sure it all looks good. have it professionally designed. When you first get started, maybe you can't afford that, and I get that, but as soon as you can afford it, get a graphic designer involved. We all think we're graphic designers. We all think we have artistic flair, and some of you might, but few of you do, I can promise you that. So have a pro do it. You'll be impressed with what you get in return, and it will make you look bigger than you are, okay? That's the other thing. There's a thing in business called legitimacy, and when somebody meets you for the first time or they get your business card for the first time, they want to know if you're legit. So what are they going to do? They're going to look at your card. Well, that's kind of cheesy. I don't know if that's any good. They're going to look up your website to make sure you're real, and so make sure when they make those visits to check you out, make sure they're looking at something that looks nice, okay? Spend some time on it, spend some money on it if you have to, but make sure it looks good. At Cross Financial, we were a small company. We never had more than, I think, 8 employees. We had a woman who worked for us, her name was Julie, and she answered the phones. We could have answered our own phones, but Julie was so good on the phone and so professional that it left an impression with the people who called us. And when people actually found out that we only had 8 employees, most of them were flabbergasted. They'd said, I thought you guys were easily twice the size or 3 times bigger. They couldn't believe it, but she left such an impression that they never forgot it. So make sure that you do the little things. There's no reason for people to know that you're a one-person business, okay? You don't have to do that. Make sure you answer the phone professionally. Don't just say, this is Steve. Answer it with your business name, So if you're using your cell phone, even if it's a personal, you'll know usually using caller ID whether it's personal or professional, but if it's a professional call, answer it professionally. Use your business name. Cross Financial Group, this is Steve. It makes a difference. It leaves an impression and it makes people think you're bigger than you are. Also, email. This is a pet peeve of mine. And this comes out of the marketing class I teach. Do not use a Gmail address or a Yahoo address. Spend a few bucks, buy the domain name that matches your website, and make sure you use your website in your email address, okay? When I get a business card for Joe's Pizza Parlor and they have a Gmail address, it screams small town, or not small town, but Little League to me, okay? Make sure that your email address is joe@joespizzaparlor.com. It makes a difference. So transition away from the Yahoo or Gmail address and use a professional email address. And my last piece of advice, and I see this as a struggle for a lot of small business people over and over and over, is soft skills. What do I mean by soft skills? I mean the ability to do some networking, look people in the eye when you shake their hand, be confident in speaking to people in groups. When I talk to high school classes a lot, and I beg them, before you leave high school, take a speech class. I didn't. I wish I had, because when I got out of high school, I was terrified to get in front of a group and talk to people. Absolutely terrified. The true story, the day I got married, I was terrified, not because I was getting married. I knew I was making the right choice. I was terrified because I was going to be in front of the church, in front of a group of large people, and I was terrified to be up there. That's ridiculous. That's stupid. The only way I overcame it was to do it, and I took a Dale Carnegie class early in my career that helped immensely, and there are similar things out there now. But if you struggle with things like public speaking or meeting new people, get some help. Work on your soft skills from day one. It makes a difference. And when you're starting out in a small business and you are the only person, you are the top salesperson too. There's nobody else that you can hand that duty off to. You have to be the rainmaker and bring those sales in the door, and you've got to be confident when you do it. So if you need to invest in your soft skills, it makes a big, big difference. And most of the successful small business owners I encounter are pretty good at that. And if you think about it, think of all other small business owners you know, for the most part, they're comfortable meeting new people, introducing themselves, and doing some networking. It's a crucial skill. The fact that you're all here is a good sign, because you're here to meet other people and do networking. So that's it. Those are the 3 lessons for today. I promised I would keep this short, and I'm going to. Are there any questions though? Yes.
Regarding your merchant marine
yes.
career, I
Yes.
have to ask. So we're talking, I can envision or picture cargo ships and container ships and Captain Phillips and all this type of thing. That's what we're talking about?
Yes.
Were you ever in like a typhoon or hurricane?
Never was in a hurricane. I luckily, there were a few times though where the weather got rough enough that when you're in bed, you take your life preserver and you stuff it under your mattress so that it wedges you against the wall so you don't roll out of bed. Had to do that a few times. And also, when you eat when it's rough out, they wet the tablecloths, completely soak them so that the dishes don't slide. So, and the chairs are all chained to the floor so they don't go flying. But yeah, question.
Why do you go from the creek to the sea?
Well, that was that's a good question. When I was senior in high school, I thought I wanted to go to the Air Force Academy, so I applied to the Air Force Academy. Got like a 3rd or 4th alternate to go to the Air Force Academy. So I thought that was over and I was going to go to the university instead, because that won't get you in normally. But then I got a call from my congressman one day and said, I've got a nomination to the Merchant Marine Academy in New York. Would you like to go? And since I was 18, didn't know exactly what I wanted to do. It was free, and I thought free was good. So, and I had a cousin going there, so that helped. So I went. It's the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy in Kings Point, New York. Yes.
I think your advice on getting it right in partnerships is really great advice. I had a mentor one time. We were thinking about starting a partnership, and I asked him, "What do you think of partnerships?" And his answer to me was, partnership is one of the worst ships you'll ever sail on.
Yeah.
And so I ignored his advice, started a partnership, had nothing in writing, and it did not end well. So you're right.
And a lot of times the other thing I failed to mention in that regard, if as a startup, and a lot of you are not seeking venture capital, you're bootstrapping your businesses, starting it up. If you borrow money from a relative, okay, that's okay. Get it in writing though. Have a formal note drawn up that outlines the payment terms, when you'll make payments, what interest rate you're paying, but get it in writing. Okay, that's going to save a lot of headaches. First of all, it might save your relationship with your parents, but it also, if you have siblings, they might be thinking, well, that's not fair. Mom and Dad gave 20 grand to Joe to start his business and I didn't get anything. Well, at least then if there's a note, you can show them, hey, I'm paying this back. All right, this isn't something extra I got, but put it in writing. I'm begging you. Yes?
2 things. You can go to Google Domain, and for $12 a year, you can get your own website. And then the second thing here.
And using the Google, doing that, you can then set up your Google email to use that domain name. Yeah, Google allows that. So you don't have to have a Gmail address if you use Google email. You can customize it.
And the second
Good point.
on the soft stuff is, as a business person, when I walk into an office, the person you first meet, you can judge that office a lot. So are they professionally looking? Are they dressed in t-shirts and fill in the blank? And it's like, and it's hard for me to get over that, because it's like, okay, this company's supposed to be really, really good, but this is your first impression. So.
And if it looks good, it sells good. How many times have you maybe gone through a drive-through at a fast food place, and there's 2 windows you can drive up to, and they inevitably have that first window closed, because now you just go to the second window to pay and pick up your food. But they'll leave the window open on that first one, and you can look in there, and it's gross in there. I mean, you think, oh my God, well, did they ever clean this place? What does that tell you? I mean, so in your place of business, make sure it's tidy, make sure it's neat, it's clean, make sure your desk looks presentable, because it all sends a message, okay? So keep your desk clean and neat. Make sure the trash is picked up in the entryway. I worked for a bank where we had a checklist for the branch managers to go through. Every time they opened the branch in the morning, they had to do a walk around, make sure all the lights were in working condition, make sure the sign outside was lit. It was a checklist just to make sure that everything looked good. Okay. Yes?
Kind of piggybacking off what you were saying about using Google domains. Sometimes you can find other domains that are as low as $3 a month, and then any domain that you get through your host, you should be able to add G Suite, which is like Gmail, Calendar, Drive, that kind of thing, for depending on who your provider is, $3 to $6 a month on top of that, and that should be relatively painless. And if they give you a free for the agent that you're talking to is trying to like not charge you, then go elsewhere
Okay.
or call it. There's a people help you get set up for users.
Thank you. So there, you heard it. There's no monetary reason not to have a professional email address that includes your domain name. Okay, it's cheap and it's easy to do. Drop the Gmail.
You don't have to have a designed website to be able to use that email. So
That's true,
if
too.
you go to an agency and they say you need to have a website to have this email, you know, you can have a blank domain, you can have a landing page there, something like that. That doesn't cost you anything. Just to be able to use it.
Yep.
So I got a question. So I didn't particularly want to go with Yahoo or Gmail because I thought it looked unprofessional, but the reason why I didn't go with the domain name is because there's actually 3 different cleaning businesses. There's mobile detailing, there's inline cleaning, there's services, and so planning for the future, I did inline services at Outlook.com because I don't want to check 3 different companies. So I mean, I guess I could do inline services at a domain, but if I do a domain on my website, as far as I know through GoDaddy, I would have to make, they would force me through their website to do a domain for each single company. I don't think it allows me to do one for just one. So I don't know how that, unless I did just one and I did it in like services like I do at the Outlook. But I was trying to bypass that while still looking, you know, semi-professional.
Yeah.
I can help you with that.
There you go. There's a connection made at coffee.
I
Great.
didn't logo anything else. It's on the business card, but I can also use that too.
All right. Any other questions? Yes.
What advice might you have for businesses that may be seeking a technical co-founder or another co-founder after they've already started the business? As far as just getting it down in writing, are there certain resources that you would direct, like, you know, seeking a lawyer or specific types of lawyers
Yes.
that
No.
you should be seeking out?
You can talk to me afterwards. There are several attorneys in town that kind of specialize in dealing with startups, and they're used to situations like that. So I would definitely get it in writing, all the more important after you've started, because you've already got something built. So if you're bringing somebody in after the fact, you'll want to take that into account. And maybe you're paying them with equity instead of cash. All that should be accounted for, though, in the written documents, for sure. Any other questions? If not, thank you for being here. We've got extra time for networking now, so please meet somebody new before you go. Work on those soft skills. If you're not getting our Monday newsletter that announces the speaker, give me your business card before you go, and I'd be glad to add you to the email list. We'll see you next week.
Thanks.
So